Joker is a reimagining of the origin story of Batman's most famous foe. It contains references to many classic films, callbacks to the comics, and some hints about its shocking finale. Here's everything you might have missed. And warning, spoilers ahead. The movie is specifically supposed to be set around 1981. Later in the film, we see a movie theater marquee with the titles Blowout and Zorro, the Gay Blade on it. Both of these were actually released in 1981. Speaking of Zorro, in some of the comics, Bruce Wayne goes to see the Mark of Zorro with his parents the night that they are murdered. When Joker is beaten up by 3 men in suits on the train, one of them starts singing this song to him.
Send in the clowns.
The song is called Send in the Clowns. It was originally written by Stephen Sondheim for his 1973 musical, A Little Night Music. When Fleck performs at the comedy club, there's cameos from real-life comedians Gary Gulman and Sam Morril. Justin Theroux has a blink and you'll miss it cameo as Ethan Chase, the guest on the episode of Live with Murray Franklin that Fleck watches as he practices for his appearance on the show. Fleck performs at a comedy club called Pogo's. This might be a very dark nod to serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who was nicknamed the Killer Clown, and often dressed as a clown character named Pogo. At one point, Arthur practices with the gun he just purchased, before accidentally shooting a hole in his living room wall. He's watching the 1937 Fred Astaire movie Shall We Dance. He's specifically watching the performance of Slap That Bass. While Astaire was a legendary dancer, Phoenix cited Ray Bolger as an influence on the Joker's dance moves while doing an interview with the Associated Press. Later on in the film, Fleck sneaks into a movie screening so he can confront Thomas Wayne. The movie playing is the 1936 Charlie Chaplin comedy Modern Times. Many locations call back to the Batman universe, but with the names slightly changed. Arkham State Hospital, where Fleck meets with social worker Deborah Kane, is based off of Arkham Asylum. Kane is also featured as a social worker in the comic book Batman: The Ultimate Evil. The name Kane pops up throughout the Batman stories. It's derived from Bob Kane, who co-created the character of Batman. When Arthur goes to find his mom's records at Arkham Hospital, the clerk tells him that she was diagnosed by Dr. Benjamin Stoner. In the comics, Stoner was a head doctor at Arkham Asylum and later becomes a villain. Meanwhile, the Joker's origin story has varied depending on the movie, show, or comic. The backstory of him as a struggling comedian was also featured in the 1988 Alan Moore graphic novel Batman: The Killing Joke, which was later turned into an animated movie starring Mark Hamill.
I got nervous and blew a punchline.
The 2 detectives who are constantly questioning Fleck about whether he was involved in the subway murders are named Detective Burke and Detective Garrity. Perhaps Burke is based off of Detective Thomas Burke from some of the comics. And of course, there's the Wayne family. When Fleck pays a visit to the Wayne estate, he first meets a young Bruce Wayne. We first see young Bruce sliding down a pole, a foreshadowing of his future as Batman. A butler with a British accent then joins them. It's very clearly Alfred Pennyworth, played by Douglas Hodge. And yes, the movie does build up to one of the defining events of Bruce Wayne's life, but we'll get to that in a bit. Joker doesn't just reference Batman lore. In the months leading up to the movie, director Todd Phillips clearly stated 2 Martin Scorsese movies as primary influence on Joker: 1976's Taxi Driver and 1983's The King of Comedy. Taxi Driver stars Robert De Niro as a cab driver named Travis Bickle, a disturbed loner who fantasizes about cleaning up the city and impressing a girl named Betsy. In Joker, Fleck courts his neighbor Sophie, played by Zazie Beetz. Both movies show scenes where they're on dates in cafes. Early on in the film, Fleck and Sophie are stuck in a very slow elevator in their apartment building. After getting out of the elevator, Fleck shapes his fingers into a gun symbol and points it at his head. This gesture is repeated several times throughout the film. At the end of Taxi Driver, after Bickle is shot in the neck, he famously makes a similar gesture. Fleck also takes his real gun and points it to his chin. Bickle attempts to kill himself this way in Taxi Driver, only to find the gun comes up empty. Like Bickle, Joker becomes an unlikely hero in Gotham, hailed as something of a vigilante after committing an act of violence. In Taxi Driver, Bickle stalks Charles Palantine, a man who is running for president. In Joker, Fleck stalks Thomas Wayne, who is running for mayor of Gotham City. Meanwhile, the King of Comedy largely factors into the movie's story. Fleck is obsessed with a late-night host named Murray Franklin and dreams about being on his show. Franklin later shows a clip of Fleck's stand-up on air and mocks it. The King of Comedy also stars Robert De Niro. He plays Rupert Pupkin, an aspiring and obsessive comedian who finally makes his big TV debut after kidnapping his favorite late-night host, Jerry Langford. In one scene, after Fleck is told that he'll be on Live with Murray Franklin, he starts to practice for his TV debut in his mother's apartment. This involves him watching a taping of the show, practicing his entrance, and pretending he's talking with Murray. It's very similar to the scene from The King of Comedy where Pupkin makes an audition tape for the show in his mother's basement. When Fleck is backstage at Live with Murray Franklin, Murray comes to meet him, where Fleck is in full Joker makeup. Fleck asks Murray this:
Can you introduce me as Joker?
It mirrors this moment from The King of Comedy.
Now, this is my introduction, and I'd like Mr. Randall, if he could, speak it word for word.
In one of the film's most shocking moments, the Joker shoots Murray Franklin live on air, but it then cuts away to a shot of a wall of TVs. Some of the TVs play news coverage of Murray's death. Others display vintage commercials for Budweiser, Rolling Rock, Kellogg's, and Energizer, as well as an anti-drug PSA starring Clint Eastwood. It closely mirrors the ending of the 1976 movie Network, about a news anchor named Howard Beale who becomes a hero to the masses after delivering this rant on air.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
He is then exploited by TV executives for ratings. Like Murray, Beale is assassinated on air. The movie then cuts to 4 monitors, which flip between playing news coverage of his death and commercials. Fleck's awkward interview with Murray might make you think back on Joaquin Phoenix's infamous interview with David Letterman. One major event that happens in the end, Thomas and Martha Wayne are shot in an alleyway as young Bruce Wayne looks on. They aren't murdered by the Joker, but rather one of the many violent followers in clown masks who Fleck inspires. In 1989's Batman, the Joker kills Bruce Wayne's parents. In Batman Begins, as well as many of the comics, the Waynes are murdered by a man named Joe Chill. Could this be a reference to Joe Chill here as well? Like in past versions of the murders, Martha Wayne's pearl necklace is ripped off. As the Joker's followers riot in Gotham, the Joker stands above them all and smears blood on his face in a way that mimics the character's iconic scars.
Well, you look nervous. Is it the scars? You want to know how I got them?
The end, meanwhile, is left ambiguous. Did Arthur Fleck dream all of this up? Was the Joker adopted? Was he Thomas Wayne's son? Is he even really the Joker? One hint, when we see Fleck running through Arkham Hospital earlier in the movie, everything looks a lot dirtier. In the end, the same hallways look pristine and white. Was there anything we missed? Let us know in the comments.